Welcome back, everyone. Imagine the scene. It's early 2026. The air inside the glass, walled conference rooms of the HYBE headquarters in Seoul is thick with anticipation and the smell of expensive coffee. The Golden Maknae, Jeon Jungkook, is finally sitting down to finalize the blueprint for what is supposed to be the biggest global comeback tour of the decade. The suits, the executives, the marketing geniuses, they all had a perfectly calculated plan. A safe, guaranteed, multi-billion-won strategy designed to break records with eyes closed. But then, the door opens and JK walks in, not just as a global pop star, but as a matured artist who has truly seen it all. He didn't come to just nod along, he came to completely flip the script. We are talking about 5 specific, absolute, non-negotiable decisions that made the entire room go dead silent and left the veteran staff scrambling in panic. These weren't just simple requests or diva demands. These were calculated, deeply personal artistic risks that threatened to derail the company's safe bet model, but promised to create something legendary. Why were the executives sweating over a venue change? What was the one shocking clause he added to the set list that terrified the music producers? And why did he reportedly tear up the initial marketing proposal with a smile? From the high-stakes tension in the boardroom to the confused whispers in the dance practice studios, we are peeling back the layers of the most controversial tour preparation in K-pop history. This isn't just about a concert, it's about a declaration of identity. Are you ready to witness the evolution of a legend who refuses to play by the rules? Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride into the mind of Jeon Jungkook. Number 5. The total blackout rejection, abandoning the multi-million-dollar hologram tech. You have to understand the sheer scale of what was at stake here, because we are talking about the highest level of production value in the entire music industry. By early 2026, HYBE's technical division, specifically the team handling concert visuals and immersive technology, had spent nearly 8 months developing a proprietary system codenamed Project Chimera, a state-of-the-art holographic interface designed specifically for Jungkook's return to the global stage. We are talking about jaw-dropping specs here, 360-degree motion capture rendering that would project a 50-foot avatar of Jungkook that could interact with the audience in real time, synchronized with wristbands that vibrated to the bass of his voice. The budget for this opening sequence alone was rumored to rival the GDP of a small island nation, and the executives were practically salivating at the thought of the headlines. Jungkook brings the future to pop. The storyboard was set, the vendors were paid, and the prototypes were sitting in the warehouse, ready to be shipped to the first venue in Los Angeles. But then came the fateful afternoon of February 14, 2026, a date that the production crew now jokingly refers to as the Street. Valentine's Day Massacre of Tech. Jungkook sat at the head of the mahogany table in the executive suite, wearing a simple black hoodie, looking over the glossy renderings of the stage design that looked more like a spaceship than a concert venue. The room was buzzing with the nervous energy of 20 highly paid professionals waiting for his approval. The lead technical director, a man who had designed stages for the Super Bowl, finished his pitch, beaming with pride, waiting for the applause. Instead, Jungkook leaned forward, clasped his hands, and dropped the bomb that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. He didn't just ask for a tweak, he asked to scrap the entire first 40 minutes of visual effects. "Turn it off," he reportedly said, his voice calm but terrifyingly firm. He didn't want the holograms, he didn't want the lasers. He didn't even want the side screens on. He demanded that the show open with what he called the void, a completely unlit stage, save for a single, raw spotlight and a handheld microphone. No backing track, no dancers, and absolutely no Project Chimera. The executives froze. You could hear a pin drop. One marketing VP reportedly started hyperventilating because the entire promotional campaign was built around this futuristic golden era theme. They tried to argue, pulling up spreadsheets showing audience retention data, arguing that Gen Alpha and Gen Z fans needed constant visual stimulation or they would get bored within 3 minutes. They told him, "Jungkook, this is a stadium tour. The people in the nosebleeds won't see you without the screens. But Jungkook countered with a perspective that showed just how much he had matured during his time away. He explained that after years of high-octane performances, flawless choreography, and massive spectacles, the connection had become too clean. He felt that the technology was acting as a barrier between his soul and the fans. He wanted to strip away the armor of being an idol and start the show as just a human being. He wanted to hear the raw breathing of the crowd, the unpolished screams, not the filtered noise over a backing track. He proposed a blind opening, performing the first 3 songs in near darkness, forcing the audience to listen, really listen, to his vocals without the distraction of his visual performance. It was a gamble of colossal proportions. In the world of K-pop, visuals are currency. To voluntarily remove that currency was seen as financial suicide by the board. The rehearsal logs from March 2026 leaked later showed the intense friction this caused. The lighting director threatened to quit because he felt his work was being erased, and the sound engineers were in a panic because a dry vocal mix in a stadium with 60,000 people is a technical nightmare. There is nowhere to hide if your voice cracks. There is no auto-tune safety net, just pure raw skill. Staff members whispered in the cafeteria, wondering if Jungkook had lost his touch or if he was sabotaging his own comeback. Was he being difficult, or was he seeing something they couldn't? The tension was palpable for weeks. The Project Chimera equipment was quietly boxed up and moved to storage, a sunk cost of millions of dollars that had the accountants weeping. But as the first dress rehearsals began, something shifted. When Jungkook stood there in the dark, singing the opening notes of a new, unreleased ballad with nothing but silence around him, the staff members present the cynics, the tired roadies, the anxious executives stopped checking their phones. They stopped whispering. They were mesmerized. The sheer power of his voice, unsupported by tech, filled the cavernous rehearsal hangar in a way that felt spiritual. He had bet on his talent over technology, a decision that terrified the corporate machine but reminded everyone why he is the Golden Maknae. It wasn't about being flashy, it was about being real. And as we look at the tour schedule now, wondering how this void concept will translate to a stadium full of screaming armies, one has to wonder, in an era of AI and deepfakes, is stripping everything away the most radical innovation of all? This was just the first domino to fall, the decision that set the tone for a tour that would defy every expectation. But if you think denying the tech was bold, wait until you hear what he did with the schedule, because that decision didn't just cost money, it threatened to break the entire logistical backbone of the tour.
Number 4. The 7-day immersion protocol, shattering the industry standard of efficient touring. If rejecting the hologram technology was a slap in the face to the futurists, then Jungkook's next decision was a direct punch to the gut of the accountants and logistics coordinators who keep the massive machine of a world tour running. In the high-stakes world of global touring, time is quite literally money. The standard operating procedure for a superstar of Jungkook's caliber, we are talking about the Taylor Swift or Beyoncé level of logistics, is a brutally efficient algorithm known as the 72-hour churn. You fly in, you do the sound check, you perform, you sleep, and you are wheels up to the next country before the sweat has even dried on the stage costumes. It is a grueling non-stop conveyor belt designed to maximize revenue and minimize idle costs. But when the initial itinerary for the 2026 tour was slid across the desk, a thick binder detailing 45 stops in 90 days, Jungkook didn't even open it. He simply pushed it back and uttered the phrase that has now become legendary within the hallways of HYBE. I am not a package being delivered. I am a traveler. He then laid out his non-negotiable demand, the 7-day immersion protocol. This wasn't just a request for a few extra days off, it was a fundamental restructuring of the entire touring business model. Jungkook demanded that for every major city on the list, whether it was Jakarta, London, Sao Paulo, or Los Angeles, the tour must remain stationary for a minimum of 7 full days. He refused to perform the concert until he had spent at least 4 days on the ground, breathing the same air as the fans, eating the local food, and acclimating to the city's specific energy. The logistics team, led by a veteran tour manager who had survived the chaotic Wings and Love Yourself eras, reportedly turned pale. You have to understand the math here to grasp the panic. Keeping a touring party of 150 people, dancers, band members, tech crew, stylists, security, and management in 5-star accommodation for 4 extra days of downtime per city is a financial catastrophe. We are talking about millions of dollars in hotel bills, per diems, and equipment rental fees for gear that is just sitting in trucks doing nothing. The finance department projected a 40% loss in potential revenue because the extended stays meant they had to cut the total number of shows by nearly half. They begged him to reconsider. They showed him graphs of the opportunity cost. They argued that fans in the cities he was cutting places that had waited years to see him would be devastated, but Jungkook was unmovable. He opened up about his past experiences, reflecting on the blur of his 20s where he would wake up in a hotel room and not know which continent he was on. He spoke about the hollowness of singing I Love You to a city he had only seen through the tinted window of a black SUV. He wanted to revive the spirit of GCF, Golden Closet film on a massive scale. He wanted to film, to wander, to explore, and to bring those experiences onto the stage. He told the terrified executives, "How can I connect with the crowd if I don't know what their sky looked like this morning?" The tension in the room was suffocating. The head of security was particularly vocal, practically tearing his hair out at the nightmare of securing a global icon roaming the streets of major metropolises for days on end. "You are not a tourist, Jungkook, see? You are a walking target," was the argument. But Jungkook countered with a plan that showed his strategic brilliance. He proposed that these off days wouldn't be dead time, they would be content gold mines. He suggested the hide-and-seek initiative, where he would leave clues around the city at a famous bakery, a local park, a historic monument leading fans to exclusive merch drops or even surprise acoustic busking sessions. He argued that this organic engagement would generate more social media buzz than any paid billboard campaign ever could. He was betting that the quality of the connection would outweigh the quantity of the dates. Reluctantly, with heavy sighs and frantic recalculations, the board agreed. The tour schedule was slashed, major markets were dropped. The itinerary became a slow tour, a concept almost unheard of in K-pop, and the result? Absolute chaos, but of the best kind. During the pre-tour test run in Seoul, instead of hiding in the green room, Jungkook was spotted biking by the Han River, buying snacks at a convenience store, and chatting with grandmothers in a market, all while his massive security team tried to blend in 50 meters back. The internet melted down. The anticipation for the concert didn't just build, it exploded because the fans knew he was there, really there, sharing their sunset and their traffic jams. The staff, initially furious about the logistical headache, found themselves rejuvenated. Instead of the zombie-like exhaustion of a rush tour, the dancers were rested, the crew had time to repair gear properly, and the morale skyrocketed. Jungkook proved that treating the staff and himself like humans rather than machines actually produced a better show. But while the 7-day rule fixed the human element, it created a massive hole in the setlist planning. Because now that he had connected with the city, he couldn't just play the same generic songs every night. This leads us to the next shocking decision, a musical gamble that made the music directors question if Jungkook had forgotten how copyright works. Number 3. The open source setlist, a copyright nightmare that terrified the legal team. If the scheduling changes were a headache, this next decision was a full-blown legal migraine that had the HYBE lawyers practically living in the office, surviving on caffeine and sheer panic. By March 2026, the musical direction of the tour was supposed to be locked in. The setlist is usually a sacred text in K-pop, carefully curated, copyright cleared, and rigid. Every beat, every ad-lib, every transition is pre-planned to the millisecond for lighting cues and pyrotechnics. But Jungkook, fresh off his 7-day immersion concept, walked into the music production meeting with a dangerous sparkle in his eye and a proposal that broke every rule of intellectual property management. He announced, "I don't want a fixed setlist, I want the open source slot." The room went quiet. Open source? Like software? One confused producer asked. Jungkook explained, in the middle of every concert, right at the peak of the energy, he wanted a 2-0 minute segment that was completely blank. No pre-selected songs, no backing tracks. No planned choreography. Instead, he wanted to perform a song chosen by the local fans of that specific city, but here is the kicker: it could not be a BTS song, and it could not be one of his solo tracks. He wanted to cover a local song, a traditional anthem, or a viral hit specific to that country, chosen by a live poll conducted 24 hours before the show. The music director nearly fainted. The legal team immediately erupted in protest. Jungkook, do you realize the licensing nightmare? We can't just perform random songs. We need rights. We need clearance. We need to pay royalties. If you sing a copyrighted song in a stadium without permission, we could be sued for millions. They threw the book at him: international copyright laws, publishing splits, mechanical licenses. It was a labyrinth of red tape, but Jungkook was unbothered. He argued that music is a universal language, not a legal contract. He wanted to honor the culture of the host city, to pay tribute to their music, not just force-feed them his own. If I'm in Brazil, I want to sing samba. If I'm in Indonesia, I want to sing a ballad that makes them cry. I'll learn it in the hotel during my 7 days, he said, casually mentioning he would memorize lyrics in a foreign language and learn the chords in less than a week. The staff thought he was being arrogant. "You can't master a song in 3 days," they cried. But they forgot who they were talking to. This is the man who learned drumming, boxing, and video editing just because he was bored. This is the Golden Maknae. To appease the lawyers, a compromise was reached, but it was still insane. A pre-approved list of 50 local songs per country would be hastily cleared by a team of paralegals working around the clock, and the fans would vote from that. But Jungkook, being the rebel he is, reportedly told the bandmaster, "Just be ready for anything." The tension during the first leg in Tokyo was unbearable. The poll winner was a classic 80-second city pop anthem, notoriously difficult to sing. The band had never rehearsed it. The lighting crew had no cues. The teleprompter operator was frantically typing lyrics in real time. When that segment arrived, the stadium went dark. The earpieces of the crew were screaming with confused commands. Then, Jungkook strummed the first chord on his acoustic guitar. He wasn't perfect. He stumbled on a Japanese pronunciation. He laughed. He restarted. And the crowd. They didn't just cheer. They sobbed. They sang every word with him, carrying him through the mistakes. It was imperfect, chaotic, and utterly magical. It broke the fourth wall of K-pop perfection. The videos of him struggling and laughing and trying went viral instantly, garnering more positive press than the perfectly choreographed numbers. The legal team, watching from the wings, slowly realized that the lawsuits they feared were being replaced by love letters from the original artists, who were honored that a global superstar covered their work. He turned a legal liability into a diplomatic triumph. But just as the staff began to relax, thinking the surprises were over, Jungkook dropped the hammer on the one thing HYBE cares about most: the merchandise. If you thought the open-source setlist was risky, wait until you hear how he tried to dismantle the most profitable part of the entire K-pop ecosystem. Number 2. The anti-consumerist rebellion, dismantling the billion-dollar merch machine for a DIY revolution. If the legal team was traumatized by the setlist and the accountants were weeping over the schedule, then the sales and merchandising division of HYBE was about to face an existential crisis that would make the stock market tremble. To understand the gravity of this decision, you have to realize that in the modern music industry, ticket sales are just the appetizer. The main course, the real profit engine, is the merchandise. We are talking about the merch industrial complex, a well-oiled machine that churns out millions of polyester hoodies, plastic lightstick accessories, acrylic stands, and photo cards with a profit margin that would make a tech CEO blush. By May 2026, the warehouses were already preparing to print the standard Jungkook World Tour 2026 inventory. The designs were sleek, safe, and destined to sell out in seconds. The projections estimated a revenue stream of over $150 million solely from goods sold at the venues. But then came the sample review meeting on a rainy Tuesday morning. The conference room was lined with racks of clothing, tables overflowing with branded trinkets, and a team of designers waiting for Jungkook's nod of approval. Jungkook walked in, touched the fabric of a $90 hoodie, inspected a plastic keychain, and then did something that sent a chill down the spine of the head of retail. He didn't criticize the design, he criticized the existence of the product. "It feels like waste," he said softly, but the words echoed like a thunderclap. He spoke passionately about his awareness of climate change, about the mountains of discarded fast fashion he had seen in documentaries, and the guilt he felt knowing that his face was printed on tons of plastic that would eventually end up in a landfill. He looked at the executives and dropped the ultimatum: "I want to stop mass production, no more polyester, no more plastic trinkets. I want the merch to be zero waste, or I won't sell it at all." The room erupted into chaos. The VP of merchandising reportedly stood up and shouted, "Jungkook, this is suicide. The fans want souvenirs. If we don't sell them, bootleggers will, and we lose everything." They tried to explain the economics of touring, that the merch sales subsidized the massive stage production he wanted. They told him that sustainable materials were too expensive and took too long to source. But Jungkook, tapping into his artistic soul, the side of him that loves painting, drawing, and customizing his own clothes, proposed a radical counter-idea that sounded like a logistical impossibility: the bring-your-own printing stations. His vision was insane. Instead of selling pre-made shirts, the tour would set up massive customization factories at every venue. Fans would bring their own old denim jackets, t-shirts, or tote bags, items they already loved and owned, and the tour staff would screen print exclusive, tour-specific artwork onto them right there on the spot. He wanted to turn merchandise from a transaction into an experience, from a product into a memory. "I don't want them to wear a uniform," he argued. "I want them to wear their own style, with my mark on it." The logistics team nearly staged a walkout. The idea of processing 50,000 fans bringing their own laundry to a stadium was a nightmare. How do you manage the lines? What if the print ruins a fan's expensive jacket? The liability, the time, the sheer madness of it. But Jungkook refused to back down. He compromised slightly by allowing a small line of blank bases made from 100% upcycled cotton for those who forgot to bring items, but he stood firm on the ban of mass-produced plastic. He even designed the stamps himself, gritty, graffiti-style stencils that looked raw and imperfect. He wanted the ink to fade, to crack, to show age, just like a real favorite shirt does. For weeks, the department was in crisis mode. They had to cancel contracts with Chinese factories and hire local screen printing artisans in every single city on the tour map. The profit margins plummeted from 70% to 15%, a drop that had investors calling for heads to roll. Rumors swirled that HYBE was going to force him to sell the standard merch anyway, but Jungkook threatened to post on Weverse telling fans not to buy it. The company capitulated. The Golden Atelier was born. When the tour finally kicked off, the scene outside the stadiums was unlike anything K-pop had ever seen. Instead of long lines of people buying identical black shirts, it looked like an art festival. Fans were holding up vintage jean jackets, thrifted flannels, and hand-sewn dresses, waiting to get them stamped with Jungkook's art. The smell of fresh ink replaced the smell of plastic wrap. And something incredible happened. The value of the merch shifted. Because every single item was unique, a print on a fan's lucky sweater, a stamp on a dad's old army jacket, it became priceless. You couldn't resell it on eBay because it was personal. Jungkook had successfully killed the scalper market for his own merch. The financial disaster turned into a PR miracle. Major fashion magazines covered the tour not for the music but for the sustainability revolution. Fans felt seen, respected, and involved in the creative process. Jungkook proved that you don't need to exploit your fans' wallets to give them something valuable. You just need to give them a piece of the art itself. It was a triumph of integrity over profit, a decision that redefined what it means to own a piece of an idol. But there was one final hurdle remaining, the biggest one. The decision that would determine who actually got to walk through the doors to experience all of this. If you think the merch policy was controversial, wait until you hear number one. This wasn't about money or art, it was about fairness, and it involved a battle with the biggest villain in the music industry, the ticketing monopolies. Number 1. The Zero Scalper Ultimatum, abolishing dynamic pricing for a merit-based lottery system. And here we are at the absolute peak of the mountain, the single most disruptive, dangerous, and revolutionary decision Jeon Jungkook made for the 2026 tour. If the other decisions were waves, This was a tsunami that threatened to wipe out the entire economic foundation of the live music industry. To understand the magnitude of number one, you have to understand the villain of this story: dynamic pricing. By 2026, going to a concert had become a luxury reserved for the top 1%, with algorithm-driven ticket prices surging to thousands of dollars within seconds of going on sale. The industry loved it, record labels loved it, shareholders loved it. It was free money. So, when the global head of touring for HYBE sat down with the representatives from the world's largest ticketing monopoly in the Seoul headquarters, the mood was celebratory. They had the projections ready. Jungkook is the biggest star in the world right now. We can charge $500 for the nosebleeds and $5,000 for the floor, and they will pay it. We are looking at a $500 million gross. They presented the strategy with smug confidence, expecting Jungkook to simply sign the contract and count his money. But they didn't know that Jungkook had spent the last 2 years lurking on fan forums, reading the heartbreaking stories of armies who had to choose between paying rent and seeing BTS. He knew the pain of the queue of death. He knew about the bots, the scalpers, and the corporate greed that milked his fans dry. So, when the presentation ended, Jungkook didn't clap. He stood up, walked to the whiteboard where the dynamic pricing model was drawn, and wiped it clean with his bare hand. He turned to the horrified executives and delivered the ultimatum that nearly caused a lawsuit on the spot. Flat prices, no surge, no resale. And we are not selling tickets, we are awarding them. The room exploded. The ticketing representatives threatened to pull their infrastructure. You can't do that. They screamed, the bots will crash the system, the scalpers will find a way. You are leaving $50 million on the table. The HYBE CFO looked like he was having a cardiac event, but Jungkook was cold, calculated, and terrifyingly serious. He proposed the Purple Ribbon Protocol, a radical merit-based lottery system that had never been tested on a global scale. Here is how it worked. You couldn't just buy a ticket with a credit card, you had to apply. The system, developed in secret by a team of ethical hackers Jungkook had personally insisted on hiring, would analyze the applicant's fan DNA using their Weverse activity, verified purchase history of albums, not bulk buying, but consistent support and legacy membership status. It was a weighted lottery designed to prioritize the human being over the bot. Furthermore, the ticket was digitally fused to the winner's biometric identity, literally linked to their face or fingerprint. No transfers, no StubHub, no $10,000 resale on eBay. If you couldn't go, you returned the ticket to the pool at face value. The ticketing giant refused. They said the technology didn't exist to process 10 million applicants with biometric security. They said the entry lines at the stadium would take 10 hours if they had to scan faces. They said it was a logistical impossibility that would lead to riots outside the venues. The standoff lasted for 3 agonizing weeks in January 2026. The tour announcement was delayed. Rumors flew that the tour was cancelled. The pressure on Jungkook to cave was immense. Advisors told him, "Just let them pay, Jungkook. That's how the world works." But he replied, "Then we change the world." He threatened to bypass the major ticketing platforms entirely and build his own site, a move that would have blacklisted him from major venues controlled by the monopoly. It was a game of chicken between one artist and the entire global touring infrastructure. And guess what? The monopoly blinked. They were too terrified of losing the Jungkook contract. They agreed to the Purple Ribbon Protocol as a one-time experiment. The tech team worked 2 zero-hour days to build the biometric verification layer. When the application window opened, the internet held its breath. There was no crashing queue. There was no 200,000 people ahead of you screen. Just a simple application form. Then, the results came out. Social media wasn't filled with rage about $3,000 tickets. It was filled with shock. Fans who had been with him since 2013 but could never afford a VIP ticket found themselves with front row seats for a flat rate of $150. Students, nurses, regular people, they got the tickets, not the hedge fund managers or the scalper bots. The secondary market for the Jungkook tour was effectively zero. Scalpers were left holding nothing because they couldn't verify their identity. It was a bloodbath for the black market and a utopia for the fans, but the real test came on the first night of the tour in Seoul. The staff was terrified of the entry process. The lines will be miles long, they predicted. But the biometric scanners worked. The crowd flowed in. And when Jungkook finally stepped onto that stage, emerging from the darkness of his void opening, he saw something that no other superstar sees in the modern era. He didn't see bored rich kids in the front row checking their stocks. He didn't see empty seats held by scalpers. He saw the rawest, most passionate, most genuine crowd in history. Every single person in that stadium was there because they loved the music, not because they had the deepest pockets. The energy was primal, it was deafening, it was pure. Backstage, the executives who had fought him tooth and nail were watching the monitors, seeing the tears in the eyes of the fans, hearing the earth-shaking chants, and realizing that by sacrificing the surge pricing profit, Jungkook had purchased something far more valuable: loyalty, immortality, a legacy of integrity. He had proven that you could treat fans like family instead of customers and still win. The purple ribbon protocol became the new gold standard, forcing other artists to follow suit, effectively killing the scalper industry for years to come. It was the hardest decision, the most expensive decision, and the one that caused the most fights, but as Jungkook looked out at the ocean of army bombs that night, he knew he had made the right choice. He hadn't just sold out a tour, he had saved the soul of live music. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why the 2026 tour will go down in history not just as a concert, but as a revolution led by the Golden Maknae himself.